The classroom buzzed with the usual energy of high school students, the occasional laughter mixing with the hum of low conversations. Emma Parker, a woman in her early 30s with a calm demeanor and sharp intellect, stood at the front of the room, lecturing her students on literature. She had earned the respect of many over her years as a teacher, but she never expected that the one thing she feared most would come to pass. As she turned to write on the whiteboard, a few students led by Tyler, a lanky, arrogant senior with a smug grin, exchanged knowing glances. They were waiting for the perfect moment. Without warning, Tyler's hand slapped across her backside. A loud, resounding crack echoed in the room, followed by a burst of laughter from the group of bullies seated at the back. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. Emma froze. Her mind raced and her pulse quickened. The class erupted in uproar, some students too shocked to react, others laughing along with the perpetrators. Emma's face flushed with the sting of embarrassment, but she didn't let it show for long. She had been humiliated before, but this was different. Tyler, smug as ever, leaned back in his chair, a gleam of triumph in his eyes. "What's the matter, Miss Parker?" he mocked. "Didn't think you'd be popular in that way, huh?" The words hit harder than the slap. Emma had been through much in her life, but this was a line she couldn't let anyone cross. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate breath, her heart pounding in her chest. Slowly, she turned back to the board and continued writing as if nothing had happened. The students, puzzled by her calm, grew restless. In her mind, however, Emma's resolve solidified. No longer the quiet teacher who smiled through the insults and dismissive glances, she was now a woman on a mission, one she couldn't ignore. She would teach them all a lesson, but not in the way they expected. The bell rang soon after, signaling the end of class, but Emma didn't leave her post right away. She stood there, her back to the room, eyes fixed on the board as the students filed out. But Tyler's laughter still echoed in her ears. Her hand clenched around the marker in her hand. She would never let them forget this. The classroom had emptied, leaving Emma alone with the lingering echo of Tyler's laughter. She took a moment to stand still, her fingers still gripping the marker as though the whiteboard could somehow erase the humiliation. But it couldn't. And that's when Emma realized that the only way to truly regain control wasn't through silence or avoidance. She would not let Tyler and his gang walk away thinking they had won. Not this time. In the stillness of the classroom, Emma allowed herself a few moments of clarity. She wasn't angry, at least not yet. No. What she felt was a cold, calculated resolve. It was not rage she needed, but precision, the kind of control that would make this moment unforgettable for everyone involved. She knew this wasn't about teaching the class literature or administering tests. It was about power. And right now, she was going to take back every ounce of control that had been stripped from her. Emma walked slowly to her desk, her heels clicking against the cold tiles in rhythmic cadence. She sat, placed her hands on the smooth surface, and took the slow, measured breath. Tyler was too cocky for his own good, and the others, they were no different. They thought they could push her, humiliate her, and get away with it. But they had no idea who they were messing with. Tyler and his friends, in their twisted sense of amusement, saw her as weak. The shy, mild-mannered teacher who wouldn't stand up for herself. They were wrong. She had spent years dealing with difficult students, uncooperative colleagues, and disrespected boundaries. She had learned patience, how to survive, by letting the waves crash against her without sinking. But this time the wave had crested too high. It was time for action, not patience. She closed her eyes and envisioned the moment, the confrontation. Emma pictured Tyler's face, his smirk, the way he leaned back in his chair like he was in control. Her pulse quickened. The plan, in her mind, was simple. She would wait for him to make the next move. Let him come to her. Let him think he could win again. She would be calm. She would be precise. And she would take him down with one swift move. But she wasn't going to do it just for herself. She was doing it for every student who had ever been humiliated, for every teacher who had been belittled, for everyone who had ever been pushed to the edge and told to be quiet. This was her moment to speak up, to show that respect wasn't something that could be demanded. It had to be earned. And Tyler? He had just lost every ounce of his. Her phone buzzed with a message, but she didn't look at it. Her focus remained unwavering. The bell for the next class would ring soon, and Tyler would be back along with his group of mindless followers. She would be ready. The door swung open, and in walked the next batch of students, chattering as they filed into their seats. But Emma was different now, calm, collected, and in control. She stood at the front of the room, her eyes scanning the students as they settled into their places. Tyler and his friends sauntered in their arrogance, practically radiating off of them, but Emma's gaze didn't falter. She knew that when the time came, they wouldn't know what hit them. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, each second, dragging by like a quiet, inevitable countdown. Emma stood at the front of the classroom, her gaze fixed on the door, waiting. She could feel the tension in the air, an invisible weight pressing down on her shoulders, yet she didn't budge. She was ready. Tyler was the first to enter the room, strutting in with the same cocky smile plastered across his face. Behind him, his friends followed their expressions, a mixture of smugness and defiance. They were daring her to say something to challenge them. Emma didn't flinch. She waited. The bell rang, signaling the start of the class, but there was no sound of settling students. Only the soft shuffle of feet and the low murmur of voices, as if the room itself was holding its breath. Tyler took his seat in the back, his eyes never leaving Emma. He was watching her, testing her. She could feel his eyes burning into her back as she began the lesson. But it wasn't the lesson that she was focused on now. She had rehearsed his words in her mind, the way she would confront him. But now, the words weren't needed. She could sense that he was on the verge of making his move again. It was only a matter of time. Minutes passed, the class progressing in a way that seemed completely normal to the unsuspecting students. But Emma's thoughts were fixed elsewhere. Tyler's insults and his gang's taunts were like a persistent buzz in the back of her mind, growing louder and louder with every passing second. She could almost feel the heat of their presence, the way they hovered like a storm ready to break. And then it happened. Tyler made his move. Out of nowhere, he slammed his fist down onto the desk in front of him, startling a few students and gaining the attention of others. His voice rang out loud, sharp and mocking. "What's the matter, Miss Parker? You still sulking about what happened earlier? Come on, lighten up. It's just a little fun." The class was quiet now, waiting for Emma's reaction. But she remained still, her back straight, her eyes focused ahead. She didn't need to respond to his provocation. He wasn't in control anymore. Tyler pushed his chair back and stood, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the now silent room. His friends snickered quietly, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Tyler made his way toward the front of the classroom, his eyes locked on Emma, his challenge clear. "What's wrong, Teacher Cat?" "Got your tongue," he jeered. He took another step closer, towering over her, clearly expecting her to back down or say something that he could laugh at. Emma didn't look up at him, her hands clasped behind her back. Tyler was close now, too close, the heat of his presence making her skin prickle. She took a deep breath, her chest expanding as she prepared herself. It was time. Without warning, Tyler's hand shot out. It was a gesture too quick for anyone to catch, a swift, open palm aimed directly at her. His intention was clear to slap her again, this time more forcefully, to remind her of who was in charge. But Emma was ready. She sidestepped with astonishing speed, the motion fluid and practiced. In a single, graceful movement, she gripped his arm, twisting it with precision. The force of her action was enough to leave Tyler stunned for a moment, his expression flickering from arrogance to confusion. Before he could react, Emma applied more pressure, and with a sickening crack, his arm broke. Tyler's eyes widened in shock, his body going rigid with the unexpected pain. He staggered backward, a cry of agony escaping his lips as his arm hung limply at his side. The class was dead silent now. No one dared to move, not even Tyler's friends, who stood frozen in shock. Emma didn't look at them. Her eyes were focused solely on Tyler, who was clutching his arm in disbelief, tears forming in his eyes. "Don't you ever touch me again," Emma said, her voice low but steady. The words were more powerful than any scream. She had taken back control, and Tyler, for once, had nothing to say. The bully was defeated not by brute strength, but by sheer willpower. And Emma, though calm on the outside, felt a surge of satisfaction. Not for the pain she'd inflicted on him, but for the moment when she had stood her ground. Tyler staggered to the door, his friends trailing behind him, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. As they left the room, remained still. The bell rang again, signaling the end of the class, but Emma remained at the front, her posture unwavering. She had sent her message loud and clear. No one would ever take her silence for weakness again. As Tyler and his gang fled the room, the silence that followed was suffocating. The students, some still in shock, exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to say or do. Emma stood at the front of the classroom, her posture rigid, her face unreadable. The adrenaline from the confrontation surged through her veins, her breath steady, but her mind racing. The classroom was a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. The laughter and teasing that had filled the room moments ago were replaced with the awkward shuffle of feet and the hesitant scribble of pens as students tried to return to their work. But no one could focus. Everyone was still thinking about what had just happened. Emma's mind, however, was clear. She had been pushed too far, and she had reacted. It wasn't just about defending herself, it was about proving a point. No one, especially not a group of bullies, could walk all over her. They needed to understand that there were consequences for their actions. Emma wasn't just a teacher. She was a force to be reckoned with. But as the last of the students filed out of the room, Emma felt the weight of the moment sink in. She had done what she had set out to do. She had stood up for herself, and in doing so, she had shattered the perception that she was weak or powerless. Tyler would never forget this lesson, nor would his friends. They had tried to strip her of her dignity, but in the end, it was they who had been humiliated. Her thoughts were interrupted by a quiet knock on the door. Emma's eyes flickered toward it, and she saw Claire, one of the other teachers, standing in the doorway with a concerned expression. "Emma," Claire said softly, stepping into the room. "I saw what happened. Are you okay?" Emma nodded, her face a mixture of calm and something else, something hard, something resolute. "I'm fine, Claire, but I needed to do this." Claire's brow furrowed as she stepped closer. "I know you did, but breaking Tyler's arm, that's a little extreme, don't you think?" Emma exhaled slowly, her gaze shifting to the window where the faint sound of students' voices drifted through the hallway. "Do you know what it feels like to be humiliated like that? To be treated like you're nothing? Sometimes you have to remind people that you're not someone to be messed with. And sometimes you have to take control before anyone else does." Claire was silent for a moment, her eyes softening as she looked at Emma. "I get it. But I still think you need to be careful. You don't want this to escalate further." Emma's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of frustration crossing her face. It already has, Claire. It already has. With that, she turned away, moving toward the desk to gather her things. Claire watched her for a moment, before sighing and leaving the room quietly. Emma didn't need anyone's sympathy. She didn't want it. What she wanted was respect, and she had earned it. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Emma didn't interact much with the students or colleagues. Her mind replayed the events in her head, each moment playing out like a film reel in her mind. She could still hear the crack of Tyler's arm, the look of shock on his face, the fear that had filled his eyes as he stumbled away from her. That was the moment she had been waiting for. That was when she had regained control, when the balance of power had shifted in her favor. But there was still a gnawing feeling deep in her gut, a feeling that Tyler's humiliation was not the end of the story. No, this wouldn't just blow over. Tyler would want revenge. His friends would want revenge. The question was, what would she do when it came? Emma had no answers yet, but she would be ready when the time came. This was just the beginning. The days that followed were a strange mix of unease and anticipation. Word of what happened between Emma and Tyler spread quickly, as these things always did in a high school. Students whispered in hallways, teachers exchanged knowing glances, and Emma felt the weight of the incident follow her wherever she went. Some saw her as a hero, someone who had stood up for herself and sent a message to the bullies. Others, though, were less certain, their reactions a mixture of awe and quiet disapproval. Tyler, though, remained conspicuously absent from class for a few days. When he finally returned, Emma could see the faint traces of fear in his eyes, a look that hadn't been there before. His once confident stride was now sluggish, his head lowered, as if trying to avoid her gaze. The humiliation he had suffered at her hands was not something he would ever forget. Emma didn't react to him. She didn't need to. She was above it now, and any further confrontation would only give him the satisfaction of knowing he still had the power to provoke her. She had already taught him his lesson. Her silence spoke volumes. Yet, despite the victory, a part of Emma still felt conflicted. In the days that followed, she had plenty of time to reflect on her actions. She had taken control. Yes, but at what cost? What had she really gained from breaking Tyler's arm in front of the class? Was the satisfaction worth the potential fallout? The truth was, Emma didn't regret her actions, but she did wonder if there had been another way. She could have handled things more diplomatically, tried to talk things out, or perhaps used her position of authority to teach Tyler a lesson in a different way. But no, she had chosen the path of physical dominance, the swift and irreversible lesson. That night, as Emma sat at her kitchen table, a cup of tea cooling in front of her, she couldn't help but think of the students who had witnessed the incident. What had they learned? What message had she sent them? She had stood up for herself. Yes, but had she inadvertently taught them that violence was the answer to all problems? Emma sighed and ran a hand through her hair, contemplating her choices. The problem wasn't that she had broken Tyler's arm. It was the message it sent. She had proven that she could fight back, but at what expense? What if? Next time it wasn't a slap, but something worse. What if the line between standing up for herself and escalating a situation blurred too much? The next morning, Emma entered the classroom with a quiet, determined resolve. She hadn't talked to Tyler since the incident, and she wasn't about to. But she knew she had to do something to ensure that the lessons of that day didn't get lost in the chaos. As the students filed in, Emma stood at the front looking at the faces before her. She had their attention. Before we start today's lesson, Emma began, her voice calm but steady. I want to talk about respect. Respect for one another. Respect for boundaries and the consequences of our actions. What happened last week was a result of someone crossing a line, pushing someone to their limit. And while I'm not proud of the way I handled things, I want you all to know that there's always a better way to solve a problem. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in. Violence is never the first solution. But sometimes, when pushed too far, we must defend ourselves. I want each of you to think about how you approach conflicts, whether in the classroom, on the playground, or in life. There's always a choice in how we react. The room was silent as Emma looked around at the students. She could feel their eyes on her, the weight of the moment clear. This was the real lesson, the one she wanted them to remember. Not the broken arm or the humiliation, but the power of self-control, the importance of choosing how to respond to the world around you. As the class continued, Emma felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had done what she needed to do, and now it was time for her students to understand the deeper lesson. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about understanding the consequences of our actions and choosing a path that reflected who we truly were. And as she looked at Tyler, sitting quietly at the back of the room, she knew one thing for certain. She had made him think twice about ever crossing her again. The story of Emma and Tyler is a reminder that in life, we all face moments where we must choose how to react to those who try to bring us down. Whether it's through humiliation, disrespect, or outright aggression. The key lies in knowing that we always have a choice. Emma's choice to fight back was not easy, and while it may have been effective in the short term, it's the reflection afterward that carries the true value. In moments of conflict, it's crucial to remember that strength doesn't always have to come from physical force. It can come from control, from resilience, and from choosing to rise above the petty battles that others try to drag us into. The lesson here is simple. Stand up for yourself, but do so in a way that empowers you, not one that leaves you wondering what could have been. Always choose the high ground, even when the world around you pushes for the low.